Hey everyone! I'm really excited to chat with you a little bit about the opening of our September Shift book, The Happiness Trap. If you haven't bought it yet, if you haven't started reading, I wanted to start the book study at the end of August because I want you to get a little bit of a taste of what this means for you, for your life, for your business, for healthy living in general. I know it can be vulnerable for people to join in on these book calls, maybe not knowing anyone or you think you're too new to Plexus to join. This is truly for every single person. Even if you choose to never work this as a business, this book is good for life in general. So I wanted to kind of open up the book by going over the introduction and the first two chapters. To give you sort of an overview of what it's all going to look like and to give you a few homework assignments to get you started. September, doing this book in just 1 month, it just isn't enough time. So I'm recording this and going over the bulk of it at the beginning so that Ryan and I, when we lead these calls, have plenty of time to really kind of dig into the practicality and to answer your questions and to go through our own thoughts as we're reading through the book together on our actual calls, okay? So I have taken what I feel like are some of the biggest takeaways from the first part of the book, and I want to share those with you. So just as a kind of an introduction, we're going to ask the question, what is this happiness trap? What does that mean? As we're going through this book, we're going to focus on the 6 core principles of ACT. And ACT is acceptance and commitment therapy. Now, we're not doing therapy in this call, so it's not going to be super scary. We're not going to ask you to bring up big life things. It's only purely if you want to share your own experience. This is not therapy. This book is adapted into a self-help book. So we're not doing therapy. Don't be scared. This is my favorite therapy modality turned into a self-help book, which is amazing for this business. When my worlds collide as a social worker and a network marketer, my little heart gets really happy. And so I am very excited to share this with you and to go ahead and get started. So we're going to be going over the 6 core principles of what ACT is. And it's called acceptance and commitment therapy. But again, I don't want that to scare you because some people take that as, well, I just have to accept my life and commit to something good. That's not really what it means at all. But we're going to go over the 6 core principles so that you truly understand and have a good grasp on the introduction to ACT. So we're going to look at diffusion, expansion, connection, the observing self, values, and committed action. Okay? We're going to have a couple assignments, but mainly I need you to know that we're going to work on, in part 1 of the book, we're going to work on how we create and get stuck in that happiness trap. We're going to learn how to deal with emotions in a new way in the second part. And in the third part, we're going to focus on a value-driven life, a value-driven business and life in general. So when it comes to the intro of this book, the thing is that we've always believed in fairy tales, right? To some degree. We may be a little bit jaded, but for the most part, we really, really enjoy hearing and they lived happily ever after. We're always kind of in this plan or goal to reach perfect happiness. We love the success stories and the rags to riches, right? We love that idea that everything works out. What if everything we've ever known about happiness and how to be happy, what if it's all false? Like, what if we've had incorrect ideas about what happiness actually is our whole lives? So there's a growing amount of research. That's something I love about ACT, is that it is evidence-based. That's some jargony words for meaning they've done studies to show that it's really true and really working for people. But there's a growing body of research that shows that we are all caught in a trap. One ruled by ideas of unhelpful beliefs about happiness, because everyone knows that this is just how life's meant to be. And this is right? We're using our common sense, and it's actually gotten us into trouble in the long run. So these ideas lead us into these vicious cycles that cause us actually more suffering than they do happiness. The truth about happiness is actually happiness is really pretty elusive. We really like to believe that everyone's happy except us, or I'm happy most of the time and so is everyone else, but I just gotta get this one thing figured out that's been bothering me for like my whole life, but I'm pretty happy, right? The truth is happiness is pretty elusive for a lot of the world. We're very fortunate as a first world country to live in the United States. Most of us do. And we have a lot of benefits from that make us feel happy. They help us live a good life. But the truth is that 30% of adults will suffer from a recognized psychological disorder at some point in their lives. The World Health Organization actually estimates that by 2020, depression will be the second biggest and most costly and debilitating disease in the whole world. Depression. Almost 1 in 2 people will actually contemplate suicide in their lifetime. So 1 out of every 2 people, and 1 in 10 will actually attempt to kill themselves. Sunny, that's really bleak. Why are you giving us these numbers and making us think about all these negative things? Because it's the truth. And it's not to be bleak, but we need to acknowledge that happiness is not necessarily the normal, and we put up these facades that's not us. But the truth is we all have things we're struggling with. We're all unhappy at some point in our lives with what we have going on, or the emotions that we're having, or we're not where we want to be, right? Or maybe we're where we're supposed to be, but we're still unhappy with that. We still aren't okay with where life is. We want more or crave more, and it's never enough. Most of us are in that place, and that doesn't look very happy, does it? But we're constantly in this kind of pursuit of happiness. So the question is, why is it so hard for us to be happy? Why? It seems like it should be pretty simple, but the truth is, we have actually evolved from caveman minds. And you guys have probably heard something like this before, but we have caveman brains. So our number one concern then was just don't die. Don't die. Avoid anything that can cause harm, period. We aren't cavemen now, hopefully, but we are still trained to be scared of things like losing a job, being rejected, failing, getting cancer, embarrassing ourselves in public. We spend a ton of time worrying about modern day things, our modern day saber-toothed tigers, right? We have that same battle going on in our brains, even though those dangers are no longer surrounding us. So, another important factor for cavemen brains was being a part of a group. So being a part of a group was huge because it keeps you alive. They protect you, they help you get food and gather and, help you survive. So we have still within us this essential survival tactic to belong to a group. So if not, you're gonna die or be eaten by wolves. So our modern day minds attempt at all costs to protect us from rejection. So I'm doing the right thing, right? Am I doing what I need to do to fit in? Am I contributing enough? Am I as good as other people? There's so much comparison. The question here is, have we seen this in Plexus at all? The answer is yes. I know I definitely have. That whole trying to be enough and look enough and comparing myself, looking left and right and comparing myself to other people to make sure that I'm a part of doing the things. So our caveman brains are getting us into trouble by protecting us, which is the interesting part, and we're going to talk more about that as we go along. But ideally, our caveman brains were there to help us survive. But now our minds are just doing what minds do, but it's leaving us kind of unhappy. So we have evolved brains that are hardwired for struggle. Brene Brown, she's my favorite. She talks about us being humans and being hardwired for struggle. So we're hardwired to compare, evaluate, criticize others, focus on lack, become dissatisfied with what we have, imagine scary scenarios, and all of these keep us stuck. So why I love this book is because it helps us work on getting unstuck and out of our own minds and into our lives so that we can live value-driven lives. So all we want to do is to be happy and successful. So what do? Those things keep us happy, and seeking happy means those things are some things that we avoid. Those things so we avoid. Sometimes the things that we need to do are scary to us, so we try to avoid them. And then when we try to avoid them, it makes us unhappy. So we're going to talk more about that in a minute. So it sounds pretty hopeless, right? Like it can sound like everyone's unhappy. It sounds like I'm always going to be unhappy. My brain is working against me. How do I make this work? How do I achieve my goals when everyone's unhappy? So it's not hopeless. It's definitely not. But it will require new ways of looking at happiness, and actually new ways of looking at the pursuit of happiness in our lives and in our businesses. So we need to know these things. The book points out that we need to know that happiness doesn't last. Happiness is actually a pretty fleeting emotion. Like we feel happy for this little second and then something else happens. Or we feel happy that we've reached this goal and then we're not content and we want to hit the next goal. So the second is that there's this in the constant pursuit of happiness, which means no bad emotions, right? That if you're happy, then there's no bad going on. That leaves us deeply unsatisfied, that constant pursuit of always trying to be happy. So the harder that we chase, the worse it actually gets. So working harder is not always the answer. For once in our lives, working harder is not the answer. So the book also talks about how the pursuit of happiness itself is actually pretty hard, like because you find yourself, like drug abusers, for instance, have constant happy feelings, but they're not really ever happy because they're using that to avoid some feeling or emotion that they're having. We'll talk more about that later too. But for once, working harder is not our answer. We want to pursue living a rich and full and meaningful life. Doesn't that sound better than just trying to be happy? To me, it does. And I think sometimes we say that that's the same thing for us, but we're still trying to reach that place of meeting those full and happy life without the negative emotions, without the fear, without the anxiety, without the worry, right? We want to have the rich and purposeful life without the bad stuff too. So the more we move in the direction of living that whole life within our values, we start to experience this sense of a well-lived life. So we're going to talk about that more and how we can have that rich, full, purposeful life, and maybe also at the same time start to have more of those happy feelings rather than trying to get rid of them. So the happiness trap, how do we set up this happiness trap? So how do I get myself stuck, and more importantly, how do I get myself unstuck from this happiness trap that most of us have put ourselves in? So the answer is, we're actually the ones that create the trap. We set the trap and we fall into it over and over and over by believing 4 different myths. So the 4 myths that the book talks about is 1, happiness is a natural state for all humans. So who told us that? Who told us that we're all supposed to be happy? That's my question. I want to have a discussion with them. But we have this idea that all humans are supposed to be happy, that we could, and that there's the ability to avoid pain, emotions, and the struggles of life. We're not sure, but most of us believe that everyone is happy and successful except us. We're looking left and right and we're like, well, they've got it together and they seem really happy. So what's wrong with me? that leaves us incredibly unhappy, doesn't it? So myth 2 is that if you're not happy, there's something just wrong with you. So in our society, we assume suffering is abnormal, a result of a flaw in ourselves or our faith. We hear that one a lot. If I just loved God more or had God more in my life, then I wouldn't be having these problems. We feel like there's a flaw in our faith or in ourselves or just a flaw in our minds, and we're somehow just missing the perfect puzzle piece to make it all right. So the second myth is that there's something just wrong with us individually, something defective in us as a person. So ACT is based on a very different assumption, and I really like this. So ACT believes that the normal thinking process of a healthy human will naturally lead to psychological suffering at some point in our lives. It's a natural way that your mind works. It's just doing what a mind does. It's just protecting us. That we actually have these thoughts and feelings all of the time, and we're never not going to have them. But Sunny, how am I supposed to be happy? We'll get there. Okay, so the myth number 3 is that to create a better life, we must just get rid of all of the negative feelings and all of the negative emotions. So just kind of block them out. So anyone want to admit that they run from negative emotions or feelings or thoughts? Because I definitely do and have. So society and well-meaning folks in our lives have told us that we can just eliminate negative feelings or accumulate more positive feelings, and that will take care of the negative feelings in itself. Or they'll just replace them. If we just have more positive, then we won't think about the negative. So it's tricky because sometimes that really does work. Sometimes we can tell ourselves to focus on the good stuff, and then the bad won't be there as much. But it doesn't work well in the long run. So the truth is, the things that we value the most in life bring a whole range of feelings, both pleasant and unpleasant. Examples are marriage, kids, a new job, relationships, doing anything new, joining a new group, a new church. All of those things require vulnerability, and all of those things come with the good and the bad. And that sounds pretty basic, but I think we go into it thinking, well, this is all going to be great. If my husband's always going to be lovely and wonderful, and we're always going to get along and see eye to eye. So if we believe that we're always supposed to be happy, but we also know that we're always going to have those positive and negatives, then we're setting ourselves up for disappointment in one way or the other. To create a better life, we must get rid of these negative feelings. And the truth is, the most important things in our lives come with both the drastically bad and the heartwarming, wonderful, most fulfilling things that we've ever felt in our lives. That's natural. So, all right, moving on along. So myth number 4 is that you should be able to control what you think and feel. So this one's tricky. So the truth is we can't fully control what we think and feel. And this is tricky for us because control in our physical world works. If I'm hot, I turn on the air conditioner. If I'm cold, I put on a coat. If I have a problem, I will find a solution in the physical world. If there is a wolf outside my door, I'll go get a gun. Or, we can protect ourselves from the physical things around us. Problem, solution, sickness, pill. We know how to control just about everything else in our lives really, really well. And that leads us to think that we should be able to apply those same concepts to our minds. And it doesn't work the same way. So, but we're like, but it always works. I know how to control things, so I should know how to control my life, right? Doesn't work like that. So the myth is that you should be able to control what you think and feel. The truth is we can't. we have much less control over our thoughts and feelings. It's not that we don't have some control, but we have way less than the experts would have us to believe. So most of the self-help type books that we've read challenge us or help us challenge our negative thoughts or replace our negative thoughts or put a plan in place to make sure that we're avoiding them. And the images that we find challenging our negative thoughts and images in order to find happiness and success. That's what most self-help books promote. They work, but they always seem to come back, don't they? We've read this really good book. We've started writing down our positive affirmations about ourselves, and then we skip a couple days, or we write them all down, but we're still really anxious to send that message. But I thought that these positive feelings and emotions and positive affirmations were supposed to make all this go away. It doesn't. So they work, but those thoughts always wind up coming back in some way, shape, or form, usually. And we're left falling into the trap again of being flawed. We just think, well, there's just something wrong with us or something wrong with me. It works for everybody else. I see them being happy and successful, so it must just be me. So again, they kind of fold in on one another and causing more problems, more grief and feelings. Okay, so the trap that we fall into is in trying to control our emotions, our fears, etc. So we set up an external struggle with our human nature. It's our human nature, and we're trying to fight against it. We create the trap, and we walk right into it over and over and over again. So we feel like we have control of our thoughts and our emotions and our feelings, though because of almost everything in the physical world, like I was saying, we know how to find a solution to problems. But mentally, we have way less control. So like one of the exercises in the book, I think it's really interesting. You've heard people say like, it's impossible for you to not think about the white elephant. If someone says, just don't think about the white elephant, what you're doing is thinking about how to not think about the white elephant, which means you're still thinking about the white elephant. Another example in the book is I want you to not think about your most favorite ice cream in the world, like a bowl or a cone of your favorite ice cream. Don't think about the flavor. Don't think about the texture of it. Don't think about how wonderful it feels when the weather's really hot outside. Don't even think about it. We come to find out that doesn't actually work so well, does it? So anyway, we have much less control over our thoughts than we would like to believe. We have hundreds, thousands of thoughts and information coming into our brains constantly. Another one of the tests that they say to try is to just stare at a wall for 2 minutes and don't think anything. It's impossible because we're like, oh, that paint, wow, I should have picked a different color, or I wonder what my husband's doing, or I wonder if this is going to work out for this or that, or our brains they don't shut down. So we don't have as much control as we would like to believe. So moving right on along. Control is an illusion. So the thinking nothing for 2 minutes doesn't really work. But we've been taught I can control them. So from a very early age, we've heard these messages of stop whining, just quit it. Or don't be afraid, or don't be a chicken, or chill out, or just don't worry about that, or God's got this. There's no reason to worry, which means that our thoughts are supposed to just suddenly go away. Also, we imply, don't worry, all of those kind of thoughts imply that we can just choose to not have them, that we can just choose for them to go away, and they will, but they don't. So there isn't a huge sense of relief when we hear people, I said this wrong. So we have these thoughts that we can control our thoughts, and sometimes we can distract ourselves from our thoughts, and we're going to talk about some of that in just a second. But isn't there this kind of huge relief when you're sitting around a group of people and you hear them talk about their struggles too, and about how they've tried really hard to set up this plan and implement this, and you hear that the people that you admire are failing too, that they've still had these negative thoughts. There's something that's like really relieving about that, isn't it? Because we set up in our heads that we're supposed to be able to control all of it. And we can't. We let ourselves down quite often. So it can be super bonding to hear that other people don't have it together too. All right, so this brings me to your first homework assignment for this first section. This is one of the homework assignments that I want you to have gone over and prepared in your mind and thought through, really think through before we meet for our first call on September 3rd. So answer these questions super honestly. It's a questionnaire on pages 16, 17, and 18, or there's a printable on thehappinesstrap.com. If you don't want to write in your book, I recommend printing it out and having it handy. That might be easier for you when you're on the call too, to be able to look back. But answer those super honestly, because you're going to answer those again, ideally at the end of our call or the end of September, just to see how things maybe have changed. Okay, so then chapter 2 is I should be happy. Why am I not? Everything in my life is put together. I have the perfect house. I have the perfect husband. I've ranked to a jewel rank, and I'm making this more money than I ever thought in my life. Why am I still unhappy? I should be happy. Everything's good in my life. Well, the problem, ACT says, the solution is the problem. So the things that we're trying to do to avoid or get rid of that problem actually is the problem. Yikes! This is kind of like a different way of thinking than we've ever thought before, isn't it? So we get into these vicious cycles that start to kind of happen as we go along. So think about you've got a mosquito bite on your arm and it itches really bad. You scratch it, but with any mosquito bite or maybe like eczema, you scratch it and it actually gets worse. The histamine reacts and it gets bigger or starts swelling and it itches even more and it gets worse. So your solution to your problem actually caused more of a problem, didn't it? It's the same way with emotions. But with emotions, it's not a great idea. It actually makes it worse. So the more we try to control emotions, the worse it gets, the more we're tugging on it and thinking about it. Because again, like with ice cream, when we try not to think about something, we wind up thinking about something even more. So you are, for instance, you're terrified to post on social media for fear of whatever it may be. So you avoid it in order to control the feeling of fear. You don't want to have the feeling of fear of whatever. So you temporarily feel better, but you don't reach your goals. So then you feel worse and you feel like without the practice or without posting or reaching out, it gets harder for you to do that because you're not practicing it. You get out of the habit of doing it. And then it becomes harder and harder and you get even more disconnected and even more fearful, and you might start to believe, well, maybe this just isn't for me. So in attempting to avoid an emotion, we create more of an emotion and more of a feeling like we failed. The happiness trap. Okay, so we use many different control strategies to try to get rid of or escape unpleasant feelings. So we have fight strategies where we try to fight them, and we have flight strategies. So our fight strategies are suppression. One of them is suppression. So, and I want you guys to like think about yourselves as I'm reading through these, because some of you are going to be like, oh my gosh, that's so me. And I did the exact same thing when I was reading it. So suppression. So you ignore the emotions, you press on, you work harder, you put your nose to the grindstone. There's no time for emotions. You just pretend like they don't exist and you stuff them way down. Other fight strategies are arguing. So I'll prove myself wrong. It should be like this, and I'm gonna make it that way. You argue kind of with your thoughts and fears. Also, another one is taking charge. So you tell yourself, just snap out of it, or work harder, or cheer up. You should be happy with what you've got. Or you're using those daily affirmations, which work sometimes. And then you've got also like the self-bullying. Self-bullying meaning you're a loser, you're an idiot, you just don't have what it takes. This just isn't my thing. That kind of self-bullying behavior are your fight strategies for when it comes to dealing with those strong emotions. Also, the flight strategies are hiding or escaping. So you might quit on yourself before you've even started. You just kind of say, well, it's easier to not start and not feel the emotion than it is for me to start and fail. So I'm just gonna hide or go away. Or you just don't show up. You avoid. You know you need to get on that book call, but you're like, I'm just gonna avoid this tonight. It's not a good night. Distraction is another one. So maybe you overeat. Maybe you don't do your IPAs because you're busy, or you use your kids as an excuse to get out of things. Not that they're not a good reason, but we often use that as a distraction. If you keep yourself really busy, then you have a good reason not to be there. You're distracted, okay? The other one is zoning out or numbing. Oh, wait, going back to distraction. We overwork ourselves. We put ourselves into many other little things so that we don't do the one thing we know we need to do that's gonna make us feel vulnerable. Done that. Also, zoning out and numbing is one of the last flight strategies. So Netflix, anyone? You just kind of buried yourself in a Netflix binge and pretended like life didn't really matter, and it feels really good because you're not thinking about all the stuff that you need to do or should do, or all those feelings and emotions you're having, because you're just enjoying your favorite show. Also, scrolling Facebook or Instagram is another way that we zone out or numb, or drinking or drugs or medications. That is very common, even amongst the most healthy looking people and happy looking people that we know are using drinking, drugs, and medications in order to zone out, to avoid these strong feelings that we have. So we use control strategies to try to get rid of or avoid or escape unpleasant feelings. So sometimes these things are helpful, and I want to point out that they are helpful if they are used in moderation, only used when they actually work, and using these doesn't stop you from living within your values and doing the thing that you know you need to do in your gut. So an example of this for me, a really raw example, is planning this book call. Okay, even up to the minute that I pushed play to record this video, I had many thoughts and emotions that I would much rather avoid, and I have procrastinated doing this for years. I've been studying ACT since 2012, and I knew it would be applicable to what I do in Plexus when I started, but I just couldn't push myself to live in that value because I have my own thoughts and fears. And so, for instance, I'm afraid that I'm not a good leader, but I want to be seen as a leader. So, but I have these fears and these vulnerabilities that show up, these negative emotions, negative thoughts about myself, that it doesn't matter, that no one's going to pay attention, that people aren't going to like it, or that it's not going to be as applicable as I think it will. And putting myself out there makes me really nervous or makes me emotional, so I avoid it. I numb out on Netflix or avoid it by doing other things that I enjoy doing that aren't as emotionally taxing. Like I reach out to my friends to see how they're doing, or I check on my teammates to make sure they're good. But then in the meantime, I'm avoiding doing what I know I need to do within my value and I'm not being seen as a leader because I'm not doing the thing that I wanted to do. So my very problem, my very solution is to do this thing to be seen as a leader. I'm not doing, and so I'm not being seen as a leader because I'm trying to avoid that feeling. So it's a really raw one. Even as I was going through these chapters, I had these thoughts of, how is this going to play out? How is this going to work? All of that kind of stuff. It's crazy what our minds can do and tell us. So we use these flight and fight strategies in order to control our thoughts and emotions. So we try to use control where it can't work and where it keeps us from doing what we value. Very often we get caught into that. And attempting to control things and emotions, like especially grief, trying to attempt to control grief just doesn't work for us. We can hold it down for so long, and it's like holding a ball underwater. We can hold the ball underwater and seem like things are all going great until our arms get tired, and then the ball bounces back to the top, and then there are all of those emotions again. We have to learn to kind of accept that grief is a natural part of life, and before we can actually kind of move on from it. Not that we ever move past it, but we move on. So the happiness trap is built through ineffective control strategies that we tell ourselves really work. So in order to feel happy, we try to control our feelings, which leads to 3 really big costs for us. The cost of experiential avoidance, which is what the gurus call this. We avoid things in order to avoid the emotions. The experiential avoidance. By trying to do that, the costs are 1, they take up a lot of time and energy and are usually ineffective in the long run. 2, we feel silly, defective, weak-minded because the thoughts and the feelings just keep coming back. And 3, many of our strategies that decrease the unpleasant thoughts and feelings in the short term actually wind up causing a lower quality of life in the long term. So it works right now, but it doesn't get us where we want to be in the long term in our lives. So those are the 3 costs of avoiding. So another homework assignment for you is 2 homework assignments for this before to bring on September 3rd to be kind of prepared. Is the what is it costing you to avoid assignment on page 27 and 28. To write down the cost of avoiding in your life. So I want you to write out the thoughts and feelings I would most like to get rid of are ... The thoughts and feelings I would most like to get rid of are this. And read through page 29 and spend some good time reflecting. This isn't one of those books that you can just kind of like read through and go, oh, that's a great idea. Oh, that's fun, or oh, that makes sense. And then you just kind of put the book down and you move on with your life. You really have to kind of work through this in order to really get something from it. This is not just a knowledge book. This is an apply book. So I really encourage you to dig into that so that you can get the most from it, because we're going to move into how the solutions to our problems that actually kind of work. So I see as you've done those assignments, you may see that you got a little bit of a problem. We've all got a little bit of a problem with trying to control what we've got going on. So now what? So in our first call on September 3rd, we're going to explore together what we learned from these 2 assignments. And then in part 2, we're going to cover chapters 3 through 6. So make sure that you've read the beginning of the book through chapter 6. And we're going to explore some kind of radically different ways of handling our unpleasant thoughts and feelings. So to take our power back in our lives, we're going to try to reduce the impact of these emotions so that we can actually live into our values. So this book, for some of you, may be so outside of your realm of thinking, and I hope that you show up for this, because it was very mind-blowing for me when I first went through this course and an introduction of it when I was in graduate school. I just remember things just starting, like it's kind of disorienting, kind of like culture shock. Like, I don't even know how to handle this. My whole life I've been told I can control or pray away all these thoughts, emotions, and feelings, and what do I do now? So I'm really, really excited about this. I'm excited mostly because I am doing something despite being scared and feeling vulnerable, because I'm living within my value, and my value is to add value to you as we go into the September shift, because friends, we have a huge responsibility in this business, a huge responsibility. And when I start talking about this, I tear up a little bit, because what we do is so important. And if we are avoiding thoughts and emotions and feelings, we're not living within our values. We have so much that we can do with these products, with this company. We know it works. And sometimes it takes just a little bit of a shift in order to make a big difference in our lives and in the lives of others. So thank you for listening to this. Make sure to share it with your team so that they know to watch this before our first call on September 3rd. And then we're going to dig in together and explore this self-help. And I think it's going to be fantastic. Thank you guys. Have a great night.